Good afternoon, everybody. Happy Friday. Happy April Fool's Day. Is it really a happy thing? I don't even know. We've got a show for you today. This is pretty big. You may have seen already circulating around the internet a report in the Washington Examiner entitled "Leaked Documents Show How Teachers Recruit Students from form gay and transgender clubs in schools." And it's a pretty big deal. Now, a lot of people have suspected this for a long time. They've said, it feels like they're recruiting. There are these clubs everywhere and they have a lot of members. It didn't feel organic. It felt like it could be organic, but it just didn't really pass the smell test for how widespread it was. And now we have evidence that it is not organic, that it is part of an activist plan organized in part by, in this case, the California Teachers Association. And it's a big deal. And I'm very, very fortunate today to have my friend Kelly, who is a researcher, an independent researcher who's been on the show before, here to talk through some of it with us, and also the author of the particular article that, exposed this whole thing. Kelly's working out some sound issues, and I think Christopher is joining us shortly, so we'll get to that soon. But before we get started with this bombshell content and going through it with you, I would like to ask you, please, to hit that like button, share the video with other people so we can get other people here to hear this live. They can ask questions, they can share comments. And if you're not already a subscriber to the channel, but you're interested in this kind of content, not just this, but also potential solutions for what to do with your kids if you don't want to be in these kinds of schools anymore, please subscribe to the channel. I also now have a Substack, thereasonwelearn.substack.com, where you can follow up and listen to an audio version of this next week. And I do post some long form pieces there. It's brand new, so not much yet, but they will be there. And also the locals community, thereasonwelearn.locals.com. So I want to thank everybody who's here so far. Please go round up all of your friends to come and listen. And I'm now going to introduce Christopher, who I hope is ready to join us. Yeah. Hello, Christopher. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
I can. So I was just introducing you and your bombshell article. I think Kelly's going to join us when she can get her sound worked out, but I think we can probably start because I know everybody's dying to hear more about this.
Sure.
I guess what I'm going to do, if it's all right with you, I'm going to pull it up on the screen.
Okay.
Is that good?
Sounds
all
good.
Right. Hold on. Probably a good idea to turn this off, my phone. It's like ringing, which is interfering with everything. All right. So I'm going to pull it up on the screen, and then that way we can go through it sort of bit by bit.
All right.
Okay. Let's see. Hopefully this will work. Well, it's not going to let me at the moment. It's asking me to do something goofy. So while I'm working on that, can you tell us how you first came to be aware of what was happening, or were you looking into this in the first place?
Sure. Well, I'm a commentary fellow for the Washington Examiner. So I, try to find different stories going on throughout the country to comment on. Kelly and I have been communicating for a couple months, and we were talking about, all the things going on with the transgender issues in schools. And so I came across these materials in which as soon as I saw it, I was just, taken aback and kind of shocked that this is something that's actually going on in schools in this country. And not only some things that are going on, but it's a proactive, dedicated movement by teachers to make these things happen and to be placed in school. So as we go, I don't want to jump ahead without Kelly or step on your toes or anything. So I'll let, when you're ready to go, I could discuss some of the stuff, the contents of the packet.
But, are you there, Kelly?
I am here.
Okay, awesome. Yes, we can hear you now. Excellent. So All right. So he was just trying to get started and saying he wanted to make sure that you were with us. So
I'm with us on a different laptop.
okay, good. All right. So so continue, Christopher. Continue with what you were saying.
Sure. So when I came across this pamphlet, it was just kind of shocking to hear that this is a stuff that the California Teachers Association passed along to be distributed to educators in schools throughout the state of California. Obviously, this week, what's been in news has been Governor Ron DeSantis' bill in Florida, talking about schools, passing, which I'm imagining is similar type of material among kindergarten through third graders. And to see these things and witness them firsthand in this packet was just kind of like, I can't believe this is real and what is going on and what is happening to our country.
Okay. Yeah, it is hard to believe that it's real. It's pretty insane. Now I do have a little bit of a challenge in that I tried to give permissions to Chrome to like do what it needs to do to share the screen.
Okay.
And I'd have to close out of Chrome in order to make it work and then reboot it. So I can't do that because we'd have to interrupt the show. So I'm hoping that one of the two of you can do, there should be down below, it says share to share screen. Does that work?
I don't see that. I have mic, cam, settings, and chat. And
all right, I'll tell you what.
I'm assuming you don't want us to leave, so.
No, you guys stay. Continue to explain what you found. I'll be right back. This is unusual, but I'll be right back because I think it's the only way it's going to work. Okay, so you guys stick around and continue to explain. Like maybe Kelly, you can pick up from here. Yes.
Yeah, Kelly, why don't you go since I've been talking for a few minutes?
Yeah, that would be super helpful. Thank you so much. Okay, I'll be right back, you guys.
Okay. I have the option to screen share. It looks like.
Yeah, but you'd have to have sound to play that video, which I do. So that's, I was going to do it. And then I was like, oh, we need to play that video. So everybody watching, if something goes awry, we'll be right back, but they should still be.
Oh, okay.
All right. Well, I would say that the biggest concern for me in that packet that you published, Chris, was, by the way, great to see you.
Likewise.
The biggest concern was having students, some of the activities that they had students participate in, which I know that's what you're wanting to share, Deb, is the packet started with the gender unicorn and then a lot of different terms for teachers to be using, and then how to begin a GSA, Gay Straight Alliance Club. There it is. And then the packet does end up with suggested activities for these clubs.
Yeah. So this right here, what are we looking at here on this form? I don't know that it expands, but it's like, I'll read it so that people, it's really small, but it says, my school needs GSA because, and then it says, besides you, who could the GSA advisors be? Up to 3 people. Who is this for? Who will use this?
That was sort of that was how probably the more shocking thing is. It's basically, I took it as an instructional pamphlet on how to recruit students and allies in the when forming these clubs. I mean, it seems pretty cut and dry there, where I'll have like a list of like a dedicated space to list names of students who could lead the quote unquote student-led club, and the space where that you could potentially find allies within the school to support the club. And there's also another space there for teachers who would basically find and list the enemies of people who go against, who would be opposing the club.
Yeah, I mean, it says, who will you reach out to? How will you reach out to these allies? And then like, who are the allies and in the community that would support the club? And it went on to say, who would be the enemies?
Correct. Yeah, that enemy, not enemies, but like people who would be opposing or who in opposition of the club.
Opposition.
So I guess technically, yeah, they would be enemies.
Well, they're only if you're allies. Like the flip side of allies are, enemies. I guess unless you have Switzerland included with neutrality, but I don't think you're allowed to be neutral in these scenarios.
And then in the bottom right corner there, it says, "Can you read that, Deb?" It's a
CTA, California Teachers Association LGBTQ+ Conference 2019.
Okay.
So, this is produced by the Teachers Association, and this is back in 2019. So those of you watching or listening who have suspected this for, a year, 2 years, 3 years, and said, this doesn't feel organic. And I venture to guess that if this is going on in California, that's not unique. What do you think, Christopher?
I would imagine so. I mean, if it was brought to got to the point where it was on the governor's desk in Florida, clearly there are other states where these types of things are going on
Right.
as well. And I would say that it's only a matter of time before they get discovered. Sorry, my dog is kind of just jumped in here. So
That's all right.
that's what it was. I apologize.
No, that's all right. But California's, so big and a lot less sort of apologetic about the things that it's doing. So it doesn't surprise me that this surfaced more quickly. But you're right. I mean, when Governor DeSantis did what he did, it wasn't out of thin air. It's not like, oh, I imagined this could happen. He had information that this was not only going to happen, but was going on in the schools at very young ages. So now we've seen an example. And it says this packet acts as an instructional guide on propagandizing students with gay and transgender information. One of the most disturbing parts of the recommendation for these clubs in elementary schools where children are 10 years old or younger. I mean, 10 years old or younger, guys. Do we need this club? These are pre-sexual little beings. Now, I know that people are going to sit there and tell you, no, babies are sexual. That's like the Kinsey thought or whatever. But those of you who are parents, okay, leaving aside what we might be able to scientifically show our autonomic, nervous responses to certain stimuli, cognitively, emotionally, are 10-year-olds and under ready to be having conversations publicly with their teachers about their sexuality. Now, that doesn't mean they don't start to have inklings about how they might feel or what they're attracted to even before 10. Not saying that. I know I've spoken to people say, I knew when I was 7, I knew when I was, okay. There's a big difference between something like that and the school going around and promoting and propagandizing and saying, divulge this to your peers, divulge this to us. And we're total strange adults you don't know. We're not your parents. And then P.S. we'll keep it a secret from your parents because there surely wouldn't be any emotional ramifications for having these deeply personal conversations with adults, even if you start off trusting and thinking it's great. What if you want to rescind that consent to have those kinds of conversations? How are you putting that toothpaste back in the tube? So to me, it's just, you're talking about children in a power dynamic situation where, they might look up to teachers, they might look up to their peers, and they could start going down a path they can't pull themselves back from in an area where it's not really developmentally appropriate for them to be going that far. And I think sometimes people will give me that straw man argument about, but this person knew when they were 6 or that person knew that. I'm like, yeah, we're not talking about privately knowing something and maybe talking to a trusted relative or friend quietly, privately about what's going on, or even keeping it to yourself. We're talking about adults trying to wheedle it out of kids and worse, right, Christopher? What else did you find?
Well, that's the thing. I think there's a fine line between wanting to create a safe space for kids who could be LGBT and confused and lonely and scared and isolated and not having friends. That I don't think many people would oppose overall, because they are kids and they some school can be difficult, even just if you are not dealing with LGBTQ stuff just in general. But the thing is, this packet made it as a proactive measure, which they were going out and recruiting. And, regardless of what the teacher's ambition to create a safe space, talking about in an article about the Kinsey scale, that's completely inappropriate, in my opinion, of any, teacher asking a student that of any age. I mean, it's none of their business. No one goes up and asks, of students' heterosexual desires or, ambition. So why would we be going around holding these types of things to students to try to recruit and form clubs? So now I think that's the main objectionable part here, is that these are, it's borderline brainwashing and full indoctrination of come to our club and check out these materials. I mean, you saw the picture there of the gender unicorn, and then there's that the video of the song "Everybody Is Gay." I mean,
I think we need to play that.
yes, definitely. That's a part that and about the whole. Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
jaw
Before
dropping.
we do, could you please explain for the audience what the Kinsey scale is? Because I think, some of us know what it is and others of us are like, what's that?
Actually, kind of like Kelly this, because Kelly was the one that introduced me to this Kinsey scale, and I feel she's a very more qualified to speak on this. And when she told me this, I was just kind of blown away. So if I could defer to her in this, I would do that. That'd be great.
Great.
Well, and you actually did a great job of describing briefly in your article, and he showed a picture of it. So somewhere within this, there's a little bit of a picture. There's where it's mentioned, and then this is the Kinsey scale of sexual behavior. So right, as Chris wrote, it emphasizes that sexuality is fluid and that human sexuality does not fit into two strict categories. And then it asks participants to describe their emotions behind having sexual intercourse with people of the same sex and other sexual fantasies. And the thing that many people do not realize, and this is me in 2019 when I was starting to research some of the things coming into California school districts under the California Healthy Youth Act. I was curious who Alfred Kinsey even was at the time. And then, he was described on one website resource as this influential sex researcher. But when you go back and look at his life, he's often considered the father of the sexual revolution. Some people refer to him as. There's the Kinsey Institute that is very influential in what we're seeing in comprehensive sexuality education. But the most shocking piece to me was hearing about this Table 34 that was in one of his books. And if anybody wants to look it up, Alfred Kinsey, Table 34. But I will warn you, it is horrific and graphic and really hard to see, because in his book, he published the quote data of children, infants, and then young children in how many timed orgasms they'd had. So basically children who were being sexually abused, and calling it data, which really desensitizes people, I think. Language is so important. But in any rate, Alfred Kinsey, there's a lot people can look into about him. But just the fact that, in society and in education, we're talking about lenses and foundational beliefs in which teaching occurs, whether it's, what traces back from a curriculum or what traces back in pedagogy or the art of teaching and the way in which it is taught. But when we're looking at any content for students, especially children and young teens, that's brought forth by an adult that traces back to anything to do with Alfred Kinsey, I, as a parent, would be very concerned about that and am concerned about this, because I think it's highly problematic. I think his life and what he did is there's a lot of concern there, valid concerns. So anyways, this is a test that people take, I guess, and it is one of the activities that Chris published in this packet that it suggests for these GSA clubs. And just one note on language, Kinsey was very much about sexual exploration. And what is shown in these packets is not necessarily, it goes back to what we were talking about a moment ago with, the difference between that fine line of being compassionate, caring, and being able to be there for someone else. But that versus going and talking to kids about things and encouraging sexual exploration in these clubs. I mean, if parents heard, again, going to language, a gay straight alliance club, which they're moving away from, they're calling it other names to hide it from the parents. But if this was called a sexual exploration club and you heard that the teacher at your child's elementary school started a sexual exploration club, I think that would get the attention of a lot of parents who would be concerned.
I'd like to think so.
Yeah.
I would like to think so, but I'm getting a little nervous that people are putting a little more effort into, like the particular configuration of their coffee drink than what's going on in their kids' curriculum. I mean, I see a lot of active parents now after the last year, but not enough. I'm still waiting for people to really like tune in. Because this should have people with pitchforks, in my personal opinion. You're talking about the state using your money in the public setting, especially using your money to groom your children sexually. Like, why wouldn't you be at the door, with a torch and a pitchfork? I don't understand.
And
or at least taking your kid out.
I think one of the things that also is that people that it's sad to admit that there is a segment of the population that actually is supportive of these type of clubs and schools. I actually had someone track me down and leave me a voicemail, like criticizing me and calling me a creep and say I was wrong with America because of this article. So there are people who support these types of clubs and schools, and I think they try to position it so that people like us are homophobes and transphobes or whatever other made up words they like to use to try to like delegitimize our position. But I believe, and I would imagine that it's similar for you too, is that this type of these perversions would be considered inappropriate by our opinions, even if they were of the heterosexual nature. I mean, I don't want
exactly
from kindergarten through fourth, probably even fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, learning anything about sexual behavior from a teacher. Right. So that's the thing that they try to basically sweep under the rug, that we're just only attacking this. This is just a type of perversion that's focused on LGBTQ stuff. But if it was normal heterosexual stuff, I think people should be outraged as well to be learning this type of, things. Right. So
I think that's what these activist educators do, or educator activists do, whichever order it should go in, is we take terms that are sort of radioactive, that people are afraid to criticize or afraid to voice concern over because there will be bigotry attached if they do. And we take the thing we want to do, which is separate children from their parents, have children see the state or its agents as the warm embrace and in lieu of family. And we attach those radioactive terms to the activities and goals that we have to sort of protect them. It's like a little rhetorical bubble wrap around the thing that would otherwise be obviously objectionable. Like you said, if it was a sexual exploration club where you were talking about heterosexual sex and exploration and fetishes and, BDSM and all kinds of things to 10-year-olds, I really would love to meet the parents that would be like, that sounds great, honey. I mean, I think it would be so transparently wrong that it wouldn't happen. But as soon as you attach LGBTQ to it and make a cute purple little unicorn and say it's about compassion and love and acceptance and intolerance, everybody fails to see it for what it is. All they see is the purple unicorn.
With a candy by its private area. If you see that.
Is it a candy? I thought it was chromosome. I thought it was DNA.
Oh, well, it kind of looks like a little mixture of two,
Yeah, see, I interpreted it as this is just a function of DNA and has no other meaning. This is what they try to do, is they try to get you to believe their theory that all gender and all sexuality is a social construct, that everything's a construct, like including being a woman is a construct. Once you can make these objective facts, whatever constructs, you can make anything a construct. You can make even, your right to live a social construct. I mean, it doesn't matter what it is. So I see that as a further way of disassociating the parts that you have, the chromosomal, see how it says a sex assigned at birth and they have the little picture of DNA. It's like they're saying this is just this accident of chromosomes and DNA, and that's all that is. And it's all the other stuff that matters. And you get to choose all of that. Like none of that is chosen for you. And what I find interesting is that in the same breath that people will tell you, I just knew I was gay. Like I just was, like knew I was, it was just this immutable thing that I've known for a long time. Then you talk to heterosexual people and they say the same. They're like, I just was always this way. Like I didn't really choose it. Right. It just kind of was. So you have the, I chose it, and you have the, this is how I was born, Lady Gaga, born this way. And what's fascinating is they seem to want it both ways. They seem to want the immunity from criticism of, I was just born this way, I can't help it, this is my deeply, like how I feel in my own skin. And then in the next breath that, hey kids, where would you like to be on this spectrum? What is your fantasy? What is your this? Which basically is choice, right? So it's just like all of it is a way to confuse the children, in my opinion, a way to confuse these children, to introduce concepts that are way over their head as far as even their body's ability to perceive what they're talking about. What are you attracted to? There are plenty of, 8 and 9-year-olds who are attracted to nobody. They're like, no one, girls have cooties, boys have cooties, right? It's like they don't even understand the concept of sexual attraction yet. They might have like that emotional, I have a crush thing, but they don't really get sexual attraction because they haven't gone through puberty. So I feel like it confuses, it throws a triangulation into the relationship with the parents. Now we're encouraging secret keeping. All of it is essentially designed to destroy the family and destroy the child's ability to form their own unique individual identity. That's what it feels like to me. And they just dress it up with these terms so you guys can't criticize it.
Yeah, I'd wholeheartedly agree. Kelly, you're a parent, so you probably have better insight on this than I do. But I mean, I think you kind of nailed it on the head there. And I'll go back to the point of like, if this is such a important issue for kids to be learning in school, then wouldn't you think that there also needs to be the equivalent of a heterosexual club if they're trying to understand their feelings? Why are we specifically limiting just to LGBTQ? Sexual identities, orientations, genders, whatever, because there are significantly more heterosexual people and heterosexual students than there would be gay. And if this is such a thing that's such a delicate topic that needs to be taught to kids, the equivalent should be happening as well. And there's a specific reason it's not. And that's why I kind of lean that this is geared towards indoctrination and brainwashing under the guise of, oh, we have to look out for the poor kids. But in reality, it's basically we're trying to get the poor kids to think a specific type of way.
Yeah, I see that. And then you went on to say, so you've got the gender
Yeah.
unicorn, and then it says other perverted indoctrination activities include a recommended videos list. The packet suggests the First Person YouTube channel. It provides 52 videos on various topics such as drag as a tool for self-advocacy, queer Black cosplay, growing up intersex, asexuality, and the importance of being cliterate, among many others. Additionally, other suggested videos are Coming Out Gay to My 5-Year-Old Brother and the animated music video Everyone is Gay. So why don't we go watch that since I've now mentioned it a couple times. Hopefully this will play all right. Okay, yeah, I've seen enough. I got it. Okay. So if you're straight, that's great. You can help procreate and make gay little babies for the whole wide world. So like we're breeders, basically.
Right.
And for them. Like, and then it says, if you're straight, that's great. But if you're somewhere in the middle, that's the best way to be. And everyone wants to kiss you. No, I can assure you that's not the case. Some of us only want to kiss other straight people. And that's not bigotry. That's just who we are. But that's not okay, apparently, because the best way to be is somewhere in the middle. But it's okay if you want to be straight. At least you could just make the babies for us so that we can make more gay people so that what? We can have no more babies? What, are we just going to like have the Handmaid's Tale for real now, where women are basically surrogates, but they're not women. They're just wombs. This is so sick. Like, I'm sorry. I don't mean to get so emotional, but I know, I've talked to on my channel, Unwokeable, and he's a music teacher. And he talks specifically about how they use music to indoctrinate. It has been done for hundreds of years. But when you have little songs that are catchy and little rhymes, and you can use these things, kids remember them and they stay in their brain much better. And they don't listen to what the thing is actually saying. It just sounds so great, but it's not so great. That is insidious. And the really sick, insidious part about it is the bigotry towards straight people. It's not just saying, it's so great to be gay, go be gay or go be somewhere in the middle. But it's like, oh, you're straight, that's fine.
It's really better if you're somewhere in the middle. Yeah.
Correct. Mm-hmm. It's almost mocking. There's like a little like, if you're straight, that's great. You can help procreate. Like, here's your role. We've decided. We, the not straight people, have decided what you are going to be, what you're going to do, and what your role is, and where you fall on the hierarchy of what's great and not so great. No, well, sorry, you don't get to decide that. Remember when it was all about inclusion and just leave me alone to live my life and love who I want to love? Where'd that go? Yeah. Apparently it was about a little bit more. They don't want to be left alone. I'm not this group of people anyway.
No, not at all. It went from, quote unquote, fighting for equality to now we're at, fighting for priority. And looking at that video and everything else, I mean, people will laugh when I say this, but it's definitely an attack on heterosexuality and the normal society of that's been the basis and foundation of human civilization since the beginning of time. They'll say that like, oh, how can you say it's attacked? There's so many more heterosexual people and than LGBTQ, and that's definitely true. But that doesn't mean that this is an attack. I mean, we are in the midst of a culture war. And that video in and of itself, it can be, more, you can't get any more proof than that. I mean, the whole, like, if you're stuck in or being in the middle is the best. I mean, if that's not a recruitment to be this whole, what they call gender fluid, I think. I've lost track of terms.
Yeah. It's and then we wonder why so many kids, you might have like a class of, 13 or 14 kids and like 9 of them say they're non-binary.
Yeah. Where do you think they get it
or
from?
Or bi.
Yes.
Right. Well, and I'm hearing so many teachers tell me that kids are finding it cool and trendy right now to identify as something other than gay or lesbian, but some of the plus symbols. Or I'm hearing from parents that kids are being teased who are straight.
Of course. My kids suffered that. Straight up. My kids were called normies. My eldest daughter went to a homecoming dance with one of her good friends who was saying she was non-binary. And then at the dance, she was standing with this group of kids, and all the other kids, this is in 9th grade, all the other kids who were friends with her friend were in the LGBT, the GSA club. My daughter wasn't. In fact, they had taken over the creative writing club. She tried to join a creative writing club, and it was so heavily populated with people who wanted to form a GSA club. They just turned it into one, and she was basically kicked out because she wasn't LGBT, Q, whatever. So then she goes to this dance on her own with her friend, thinking we're all going to dance, whatever. And all they wanted to do was stand there and make fun of the cis people, make fun of the hetero couples and the normies and whatever. And they kept saying to her, "Are you sure you're straight? Are you sure you're straight?" And they even went so far as to say, "Well, it's okay. We'll let you in. We'll let you be our honorary straight friend." And she still is to this day. She's like the only straight person in that friend group. She doesn't go to the school anymore, but she's still friends with the original friend because they grew up neighbors. You know, they grew up together near where my ex-husband lives, and they're all still bosom buddy, but she's the only straight one in the whole group of kids.
It has a very Orwellian Animal Farm vibe to all this, where they're like, starting off for one thing and then slowly like you're corrupting the whole method to just usurp power and gain control over everything. And I mean, that seems like pretty much the way you described is pretty much the plot of Animal Farm in and of itself, except, with whole sexual orientation and identities. And it's it's something that's been going on for a while. And I mean, I guess better late than never to shine attention on it and whatnot. But it's pretty, I literally think that this is a huge danger to our overall society that we have to be aware of that our youth are being indoctrinated and brainwashed with these things. And you said, as you mentioned, your children are, prime examples of that. So it's really,
I mean, thankfully they came home and told me, and, she did. And she said, she called me, she's like, you come get me. I don't feel comfortable. And she just wasn't having fun. So it didn't really affect them in that way, other than I definitely see the pressure to just accept and deal with the reality that these people are presenting as opposed to reality. And so then if I, as a parent, try to say, that person needs help, like that person, that's not reality, this doesn't really exist, I get pushback even from my own kids. And this is a warning I give to parents all the time. It's like, even if you say, well, not my kid, or that's not happening to my kid, or it won't happen to my kid, it is uncomfortable for your child, even if they're in this climate. So for all their discussion of, we want to create an inclusive and tolerant and diverse climate where everybody loves each other, they don't really mean that. They don't. They mean for everyone who completely embraces and agrees with what they're doing. If you're uncomfortable with it, if you disagree, if you prefer reality, scientific reality, and you just think this is age inappropriate and not for nothing taking up valuable education time, away from academics, you're on the outs. They don't want to include you, and that makes the life for your child uncomfortable. And what usually happens, is human nature, is you conform to accepting it. You resign yourself to accepting it because it takes too much energy, too much emotional, it's too emotionally draining for them to fight it. And we as parents shouldn't be expecting, in my opinion, shouldn't be expecting them to. You shouldn't be expecting your 10-year-old to stick up for themselves as a cis person in this environment. That's too much to ask. That's our job. We protect children. Even in teenagers, even in high school, if other adults are doing this and creating this environment, it's up to adults to intervene and not just say, well, the 16 and 17-year-old are just going to have to get tougher at resisting this insidious message. Would you want to do it? If you were 16, go back to being 16 in your brain. You want to be in that environment if you're cis? If you're hetero? It's not comfortable. So that's just something else I think we need to do, is remember there's kids, like they're living this every day. They have two choices: accept it or fight it and be on the outs.
So you actually bring up an interesting point. And the one, then you said that when would you do it if you were 16 and 17? I actually did do that in my high school. The battle at that time wasn't this, obviously. I graduated high school in 98. One of the things that I started, it was basically like this anti-white, sort of like the predecessor to CRT being CRT, when it was like an anti-white curriculum. And there were all these clubs in my school. There was like a Black Student Association, an Asian Student Association, a Hindu, Indian, Pakistan, like every other group was there, but people of your European, American cultural heritage. So I started a club with the acronym ECHO. It was named the European Cultural Heritage Organization. Basically stuff, to kind of Western civilization, European things. So because there was really never a spot for that.
That's awesome too. It's still pretty widespread. Europe's a continent.
Yeah.
Like they have Africa. Why can't you have Europe?
Right. And it was basically just kind of wanted to talk about, just kind of like gathering ideas. Everyone was welcomed. I specifically had my governing board that I had there, my president, vice president, everyone was a different race. I did that specifically. but I was getting vilified in school, called racist. My posters that I put up were being graffitied with the junior KKK, written all them in the white racist club. Stuff that you would actually think happens now was happening back in 1998 as well. And it's just that type of thing that maybe there needs to be like, these type of clubs for, straight students as well. And kind of have like the, instead of having the gay LGBT straight alliance, just have like, I don't know. I mean, I came up with a joke, and this is something I've had for a while. We were talking about a similar club. We have this. So I was going to call like the acronym club was going to be straight. And the acronym stood for Students Trying to Reinforce Adherence in General Heterosexual Tradition. And, why not have like clubs? If they're going to do this, okay, fine. Then if this is what you want to do, then have the other perspective representative as well, and don't go against them, and don't push back, and don't resist those. Like if you want to have all that, and I think that's the thing with people on our side is, if you want to have clubs like this, that's fine. Even though this is a little perverted, so I would hesitate to use the phrase just fine. But it's the resistance to, you want to have equality and inclusion, but as you were saying earlier, it's inclusion only if you're believing our ideas. So if you want to have inclusion and ideas, okay, you want to have your gay unicorns or gender unicorns and whatnot, that's fine. Then have like these, this straight club or the heterosexual club or something. I don't know why you would need to have these in school to begin with, because the primary function of school is to, learn reading, writing, arithmetic, and all those types of things. But if we're going to have this now as far as like a socialization process, why not teach everything? Why just be specifically geared to LGBTQ stuff? There's plenty of kids who are straight, heterosexual, who have problems. They're introverted. When they're dating, they have things. They worry about their image, if they're good enough to get a girlfriend or boyfriend. So there's plenty of problems where these clubs could be for straight students too.
The subtext of it all is, if you're part of the dominant or normative, group, if you will, heterosexual, cisgendered, whatever they call people who aren't in their little club, the subtext is, you're going to be fine. In fact, you have privilege. So you don't even have to be white. You could be black and be heterosexual, and, and somebody would say, especially if you're male, and they would say, well, that's a certain kind of a privilege because you're not, a black female. You're not on the intersectional scale, like you're higher up or whatever. It's for first power. So because they're using intersectionality, they've got a whole new way of responding to people who say, why aren't you including me? Or why can't I have my own club? The answer basically is, because power and privilege, because you already have, you're fine. And so you don't have needs. You don't have that, and they'll say, we need to create a safe space for these people. See, even in this little document here, it says the Connections Club offers a safe and welcoming place for any student. Now, here's my question. Schools, teachers, why in the hell isn't the regular classroom, isn't the first grade, second grade, third grade, fourth grade classroom, fifth grade classroom a safe and welcoming place for all the children? If it's not a safe and welcoming place for all the children, in other words, if there's a child in there who picks up on that another kid is a little effeminate and is a boy, or is really masculine as a girl, whatever their issue is, that, they're a little different and it seems to be gender nonconforming, and you're the teacher and you need a whole separate club they're going to go to when they're not in your class to feel safe, what the heck are you doing during the hours they're in the class? Why aren't you saying, we don't treat people that way, we're kind to everyone, and you don't pick on people, and that's just against the rules, and that's that. I don't care who you are. There's just certain core fundamental values that a person's, Horton here's a who. A person's a person, period. Not a this person, a that person, another person. The person's a person, and we treat people, all of them, this way. Here's your safe and welcoming place. It's called my first grade class. Let's move on and learn to read. And instead, they have us believing that these kids need a separate safe place without anyone asking, why are all the other places in school not that? And as soon as you ask that, instead of saying, you're right, we got to do better on the whole, like, be nice to people thing generically, then they'll tell you they need to bring all the gay stuff into the classroom. Never mind going to a separate club. Now we need the gender unicorn in the first grade class. So there's no in between. Everybody seems to have lost the possibility You know, it's all either or, false dichotomy. They can't even think that, you know, first grade classes were ever a safe and welcoming place, or even fifth grade classes for kids, before they were consciously identifying all these potential ways you could bully somebody. I was bullied a lot as a kid, not for this. And I was gender nonconforming. I was a tomboy. I was never bullied for being a tomboy. I was bullied for like 10 other things for which there's not a club, but not that. And if I had been, I actually feel pretty confident that the teachers I had looking back would have said, cut it out or you're going to the principal's office. That'd be it. They don't do that anymore.
Yeah, and I think we saw that with a few years ago. I don't remember when, but there was like this anti-bullying campaign. That, I mean, how long has bullying been around? Like what, millennia? I mean, if you're going back, then all of a sudden they were putting in the bullying campaigns, and they were kind of sort of either lightly associating it or subliminally associating with LGBTQ students as if they were the only ones who were bullied in schools, which is categorically not true.
100%.
So it's all about like, being it's sort of like the oppression Olympics or the marginalized Olympics of like who has the, biggest victimhood here. And it's just wrong. Like you said, if this was going on in class, the teachers should stop it. I mean, I know I was bullied and a lot of times teachers didn't do it. And I just kind of had to like, go upon learning it and standing up for myself and getting into like, handling that way. And even then, like what sometimes you'll see what is bullied in class, they don't see when you got bullied on the recess or in the lunch.
Exactly.
So you can't really have a constant monitor of it. It's just kind of like about teaching to treat people with respect overall, and not be a bully or just do that type of behavior. But I mean, as long as that's just kind of sadly to say human nature. So it's going to be hard to say like you're going to stop all bullying regardless of the cause. But when they come to like try to make it specifically for like these LGBTQ issues or clubs, it's just wrong.
Right. I do notice too that in these categories, so you have, at the elementary grades, we aim to create the inclusive school community. So they are already directing it back out to the school with little elementary school kids. They're like, this is where the activism lives. We aim to create inclusive school community and foster respect for all genders, races, and identities. So that's teaching the little elementary school kids that they have to go out and bring it there. And then the middle school one, they expand on this. And now we have supportive space for all students who identify and allies. So now it's like, if you aren't in one of this group, but you want to come in and help be an activist for them, now they want you in there too. And then they talk about promote the positive social network to lessen the isolation. So they're implying that if you're LGBTQ, there's already other people are isolating you. You don't need any evidence to prove that that's true. It's an accusation baked into it. And so you're setting up kind of an adversarial relationship with everybody who doesn't 100% accept what you're dishing out. And you're now free to call it unsafe because of that. And then, of course, in high school, we take it another step farther. We will do our best to raise money for the improvement of the acceptance of this community, and we'll dedicate our time to those efforts. So we're sort of grooming these kids to be full-blown activists by the time they're done with high school, to take it probably outside into the world. And then the creepy part, I think you mentioned this in the article, I will respect what is said here stays here.
Mm.
The secret keeping.
Yeah.
And so go ahead.
No, that was like probably when I saw that, I was like, this is like the issue that every parent would have, because if they're kind of have the students, not saying pledging allegiance, but like kind of swearing allegiance to this rule, well, then they're not. There's a very good chance that parents aren't going to even know this is going on, and then when they do, it's too late because they've already been indoctrinated and brainwashed to think a particular way. So that was and that was interesting that was one included in the rules and the very first rule. So I mean, I think it's telling in and of itself.
Yeah, just even amongst the kids. And then it says the packet also asks the teachers to list supporters and enemies. So here's where it says, what or who do you anticipate being a barrier to your success? What a nice little euphemism here.
Well,
sorry,
one
go ahead.
thing on the previous page, it also is the Connections Club is the name for elementary school. So if parents hear that there's a Connections Club on school, hey, that sounds like fun. You need to make some new friends. You just started there, join the Connections Club. And it's already been out there in in media, and people have discussed all these other names they're using to disguise what the club is to the parents. So whether it's a PRISM club, so it sounds scientific, or whether it is a UBU club, typically they're not using the, real identifying topic in the name of the club so as to further hide it from the parents.
And we need to remember that elementary school starts at, 6 or 7 years of age, depending on the state. So if you're in kindergarten, that's 6 years old. Some kids go to pre-K a year younger. And so they're talking about children who identify with LGBTQ and ally community. That, that, like, they're very young children. That strikes me as too young just to even make that designation about themselves. So how are they assisting the children in figuring out if they should be in these clubs?
That's the $1 million question, and what they really don't kind of say. There was it just says like who the space there that's dedicated for who would be the students who could lead the club. I mean, how do you know that? Like, there has to be something that's not being said or told in this whole thing,
right?
For a teacher to know anywhere from an elementary school, especially elementary school and middle school, that could be leaders for this LGBTQ club. I mean, I'm trying to think when I was in first, second, third, and fourth grade, all I really wanted to do was play football with my friends. I definitely wasn't thinking about like sexual orientation or identity. So I don't know where you would kind of come up with how you would identify these particular leaders. And another important thing is that in that packet, it says, it emphasizes that it's a student-led club, but there's also a section there where it asks, how much it asks teachers to list how much of their own money they're willing to spend on this club, which, clearly indicates, who the real teachers are and who the real leaders of the club are. It's basically an indoctrination program, but I mean, it's how their students are picked and identified. I mean, you probably have to do some deep undercover work to figure that out of how to get that out there or get someone on the
Well, in the packet, they're leaving open spaces for the staff, the teachers facilitating these clubs in, writing in all of the answers to these. So it is thought often from what it appears to be in the mind of the teachers then looking at how to execute it, how to recruit for it, how to establish it, how to form allies. Other organizations are obviously encouraging this. So we've got the teachers unions and their allied organizations and those resources from those groups. And it's everything in this. I mean, I remember starting a student club in high school. It was me and my friends. It was our idea. I remember going to the school administration as far as how we conducted it, forming our mission statement, deciding what the clubs were going to be like, finding the teacher. We did all the work because it truly was student-led. So what this looks like to me, in my opinion, is that the definition of student-led is being adjusted.
Well, and we already know they're doing that with a lot of things. We know in, for example, Cherry Hill, New Jersey, where I did a lot of research and did a webinar last week for them about their new mandatory Black History course. You have to take it to graduate. And they claim that the effort to create this mandatory course was student-led. And where did they get that information? Because a group of students, I'm sure all by themselves, put together a protest after the George Floyd thing. And some of the students who put that protest together, came to them and said, we think there should be this class. And then, of course, we're going to jump right on that, spend a bunch of money and mandate a class for all the kids because this handful of kids. So the teachers, I believe, know who are the children who are most prone to be activists in the first place. There's a personality. Okay. Who are the kids that talk the most about these issues? Who are the kids that are most upfront about this? Who are the kids who seem vulnerable? Who are suggestible that they, need this? And if you are trained, as it looks like these CTM members are being trained, if you're trained in that, how to find the students to do your thing. They find students that they can add to the school board. Those are the student reps on school boards. So they know how to go out and find their little comrades, even as young as elementary school. And I think they go and they find those kids, and what they're doing, like a lot of sort of, a lot of people who are in sort of any kind of a pyramid scheme, Ponzi scheme, activist organization, whatever you want to call it, they know who's going to be receptive to their manipulations. And then they use them to go carry their message out farther and say it's student led, but it was not the student's idea. They've been put up to this in a pretty direct way, in my opinion. There's no way they just came up with this on their own. Here's the material telling them how to do it.
Yeah. The fourth point from the bottom talks, it is politics. So they're bringing politics into it. I mean, they're talking about Gelson's Day of Silence above, and they're talking about making things for, it looks like, was it the football team making, pins or something for them to wear. So again, I'm hearing from students and from staff that if you're not the leader for this club or you don't attend the club, but if the club does something and you don't participate, or if you're a teacher and you don't put the club signs in your classroom, you're being outed as, not an ally. And
right. It's a sorting mechanism for othering people who don't approve. So the whole thing about diversity and inclusion is a lie. And it always was. But this is just one more example where they're really not interested in diversity. To them is not the norm. That's all that means. So not normative equals diversity. If you are normative, you don't count. We don't want you.
Right. And they say that Abraham Lincoln is a gay historical figure as well in that document.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So there's the ground rules, and that basically takes us to the bottom of this document. I hate to say it. It's kind of like I wrote in the description. None of this surprises me, which is why it's so disturbing. It doesn't surprise me. I mean, it makes me really sad and angry and all those kinds of things. But right, Kelly? I mean, we've been saying this since 2019. We've been saying this feels like it's way too organized and way too just everywhere, pervasive. We couldn't believe that all these school kids woke up one day in 2019 or before and said, we need to have these clubs, and they're going to all look exactly the same, and they're going to do the same things, and they're going to have the same activities nationwide. That gender corn guy, he's in North Carolina too. You guys are in California. I mean, this is not confined to California. This is everywhere.
And allegedly, what I have heard is that these teachers who organize these clubs often discuss how hard it is to retain student attendees for these clubs. Or, there's a lot that people can find just, publicly looking online, and CTA had put out a description of some of their trainings, and one LGBTQ training was a description that basically said how the teachers clawed their way back to existence with this club, because again, they're the ones recruiting. It's their dream to start these clubs and be these, accepting rescuers of these kids, whatever they see themselves as. And in the end, these kids that are recruited don't always remain in the club, and they have other interests and other things they want to do, like be kids.
Right. And for those who are wondering about the Abraham Lincoln reference, I just looked it up, and I'm not surprised, is what I suspected. But as we can well imagine, we're talking about a man born in like a log cabin. Okay. and also in those days, sleeping arrangements with young men traveling, going to school together, etc. You didn't always have the luxury of two completely separate beds, just like women. We see in the movies all the time, but nobody says that they're gay, where there'd be two young women or, teenagers who have to share a bed in a house or share a bed when they're traveling somewhere because there's one bed, and it wasn't so weird. right? And it was also a way of staying warm if you didn't have, like you don't have central heat. So you sleep in the same bed with another human, you're going to stay warm. There's nothing sexual about it. So he wrote in some of his writings about sleeping arrangements with another student when he was traveling, they were bachelors, so activists are saying like, see, that's proof they were gay because they slept in the same bed when they were bachelors. And of course, that was common at the time. Also, he wrote a sort of a joking poem at one point in time about two men marrying, and it was supposedly a joke that was taken out of his biographical material. But that's not evidence. It's just something he wrote as kind of a farce. But the most compelling piece of evidence for me that he was not is that he was reviled. His political opponents hated him. And, there were people who celebrated his death as much as there were people who mourned him. He was really, truly hated. And it would have, given the time frame, it would have damaged him tremendously to be accused of homosexuality on the flimsiest of evidence. And yet he was never accused. He was never accused of homosexuality by any of his opponents at any point in time, despite them researching and digging into his whole life and everything, because they hated his guts. That, coupled with the fact that he fathered 4 children and had an enduring long marriage with Mary Todd, regardless of what a weird woman she was. I mean, they had a long marriage. And I know that's not proof of anything, but there's just no evidence of it, except he slept in the same bed as a man when he was a bachelor for a little while. And that's what they're saying. He's a historically gay figure. That's just not factually correct. That's a reach.
Yep. And I'm seeing a habit of this throughout all of education and in other ways, even in the California legislature, I've seen this, where an agenda is formed. They already have their conclusion in mind and their goals, and then they work back from that conclusion, call something a study, and in the midst of their study, they can then go forward and said, well, we were really surprised at our findings, or research suggests, or our findings, even though the ones with the agenda are the ones often conducting said research. It's being seen throughout, and people really do, unfortunately, some take that bait and they go, well, this is substantial. A study has been done. Research has been conducted, but go see the research. Who did it? What was the sample size? What time, period did it last? And, are there any other studies on the topic matter? Because there's a one group pertaining to the comprehensive sexuality education, and they're talking about how they were surprised at findings in one of their Zoom presentations that, sex education was occurring in elementary school. And then they discuss how beneficial it is, but they're the ones pushing this. So.
Well, and to Christopher's point, if it's so fabulous that, for these kind of clubs anyway, now they have the comprehensive sex ed for everybody, where they are talking about pleasure with all the kids. But what they're not doing that is unique is they're not having a separate club where the straight kids can explore their sexuality. I mean, they talk about it in class now. See, I think what's going to end up happening is just that the clubs are going to become the classes. They're no longer going to be a voluntary, I decide to join a club. I think comprehensive sex ed is like laying the groundwork for the clubs to be additional, perhaps. I'm not saying they'll go away. I'm saying that the argument now is it's going so well and these kids are learning so much. We just want all the children to have equal access to this wonderful information. And they're pushing it back into the classes so nobody misses out on this craziness and the queer theory. That's what I think is happening with comprehensive sex ed. You don't get to opt out. You don't have the choice anymore to opt in.
Right.
I just don't. I mean, what's hard, I think, for a lot of parents, you guys, and maybe you have some thoughts on this, is for me, I don't care what the end game is. I have theories, but I just don't care. I don't need to know. This is bad. It's abusive. It needs to end. But a lot of people really struggle because they can't imagine any kind of rational end game for this. So for some bizarre reason, the inability to imagine a rational end game they work backward from there and say, so this can't really be that bad. Surely they don't want to end the human race. Surely they don't mean to sterilize perfectly healthy little children because reasons. Like, surely they don't want more suicides. You know what I mean? So like, and yet I have to sit there and say, like, what makes you think they don't? And why would they need to even have that? Why do they need to have a rational end goal? What if all of this is about the day-to-day narcissistic validation that comes with being in power and just having the power to disrupt things that are because you're jealous, you're envious, you're angry, you're just, you're disordered in your thinking, and you just like every day to wake up in the morning and basically stick your middle finger in the air to society. I mean, maybe that's the goal. I don't know. I don't care. All I see is it's bad. I don't need reasons. But do you guys have any theories?
I think point blank, I mean, I have no reservation about even saying this. It's just fanaticism. And it's basically, if they want, the whole objective was to not, have a society in which, LGBTQ people were beaten up or assaulted or discriminated or harassed, then you just teach that part. You just basically teach people to be decent. And
well, we've passed that.
Well, that's my
point.
That's
a long
why
time
I say
ago.
this is going from to the things where they want to indoctrinate to, have priority or think these people should be treated like unicorns, like they're like their own unicorns in society, that they're just these special mythical creatures. I remember, years ago, or maybe a year ago, whenever was it 2010, 2012, when gay marriage was legalized.
Yeah.
One of the arguments were, oh, well, gay people have been through this struggle, so they won't get divorced as much, as if they were some mythical human being that didn't have the same type of, feelings or disagreements as heterosexual couples. And I'm like, no, they're human beings. Human beings,
Exactly.
fall in love, they fall out of love, they argue, they, cheat, they are infidelity.
Yep.
Whether they're heterosexual or homosexual. So why are you trying to like put these groups on a pedestal and, bow down to them, when in reality, it's like you said, it's gone well past equality to now they want to, like, be priority and special. And that's the whole thing. I think that's the end game, where there is this fanaticism of what they're trying to accomplish.
Right. Well, and my concern too, obviously, is what we've seen, and their affiliate organizations and this giant bait and switch. Parents think they have some semblance of involvement with their child's upbringing, but it's being removed. And there's all these organizations behind what's happening in education that parents are unaware of. There's content being hidden from parents. But even beyond that, a step further, what we're witnessing is a societal shift in what is, the focus of education. What is the focus towards children, and what is not seen in education? We're not seeing clubs really being thought of and envisioned by teachers that are advancing them in subjects that they're struggling in. We know California is talking about, they're wanting to be kind of like the rescue place from those in Florida, with this legislation. But what's going on here is,
yes, come here and groom our children. Now you're rescued.
Right. Well, that's what gets me. I grew up in public school. My kids were in public school until we took them out. And even as I'm going through our homeschooling programs and materials that the kids are getting, their counterparts in public education are missing opportunities. Kids are being turned into little activist revolutionaries, but what they're missing is going to put them, back when they're adults, when they need to enter, the workforce, or when those things happen. There's so many missed opportunities and clubs that are not instilling a love of learning. And then in the midst of all of this, there's so many things happening that are truly robbing children of an opportunity to just be kids. Exactly.
Right. every time I have mentioned that to people who support this stuff, not necessarily rabidly, but like they support it, they don't see the big deal. When I've said, well, the homeschool kids are getting this, or the kids who are not in the schools and they're doing co-ops or whatever they're doing are getting all these other opportunities, they'll be ahead in the future. Something even more disturbing happens. They will tell you they disagree with that premise because their kids are reimagining the future top to bottom. So that's why what Christopher says really resonates with me, that there's a fanaticism where it falls on deaf ears because they're not preparing their children, and the teachers who are on board with this aren't preparing children for a future of what is, even if it's like, a more modern version of it. They're preparing them from a future that doesn't exist yet.
Right.
That is like some kind of utopia that's supposed to rise up out of the ashes of what is. So they couldn't care less if the kids are not prepared to live in this world, because they're not going to have to live in this world. It's more Jim Jones like than I think most rational people want to think about, because that's what I see. And what I'm really scared about is it's escalating the overt, for lack of a better word, craziness. I mean, I just don't really have a better word. Like the overt rejection of reality, the demonization of objective reality, the willing embrace of fetishes, fantasies, and fiction, and then saying validate my embrace of fetishes, fantasy, and fiction, tells me that we're dealing with a large number of people who actually believe, like he said, they actually believe that you get heaven or paradise or some kind of utopia out of destruction, out of chaos, and out of, taking everything that we see around us now that you and I value and making it go away. So when you try to tell them like academic excellence is falling away and they're missing out on French club and math club and, the literary society and whatever we used to have when we were kids, and they just sort of chuckle softly to themselves like, poor dear. Do you think this is all going to still be here when your child is 18? That's the read I get off them.
Right.
Yeah, there's actually, I don't know if either of you have studied. Oh, okay. So full disclosure here, I graduated Penn. Russian and Eastern European Studies was one of my majors. So I had to spend a lot of time studying the origins of like the Soviet Union, the Bolshevik revolutions, and what a core tenet of this Marxism, Bolshevism, Leninism that happened was this envisioning this new society in which everyone was supposed to be equal to the core tenets of Marxism and communism, but it was always planning for the future generations. They were always fighting now so the people in the future would have a better lifestyle in existence, and that's embodies of what this movement is. Like you perfectly nailed it on the head. They're planning, they're pitching it. Their marketing is not for today, but for tomorrow. I mean, go back to this recent revelation when DC Comics came out with Superman's kid now was going to be bisexual, and they changed his slogan from truth, justice, and the American way to something and fighting for a better tomorrow. And that you can't get more, a better example than that type of propaganda. That they're basically, that's why, all these clubs are being formed, is to like create for this tomorrow that is.
I don't know who's going to live in this Tomorrowland, because they're trying to sterilize half the kids and they're telling the other half they're bigots and horrible people who only serve to breed for them. So, I mean, I'm trying to figure out who the population of Tomorrowland is going to be and how they're going to, how are they going to be all happily living together? At least the Shakers made nice furniture. They decided not to have children anymore. Like what they're not building anything. They're not inventing anything. They're dismantling math, science, everything. I think fanatic is a really good word. I really do. I think it's a perfect word.
Thank you. And I would actually argue that ultimately, I don't know when, I don't know how, but I think this is ultimately going to lead to the implosion of the United States society. But we could even go further than that, because this whole LGBTQ movement, while we're focusing on the schools in our country, is something that is happening literally all over the world, especially in Europe. I'll give you a perfect example. I was in, I did a study abroad over in Russia in 2018. And as I was coming back to the US, I wanted to go to different studies of Eastern Europe, cities of Eastern Europe. So I was in Prague in 2018, summer 2018, which was the 50th anniversary of the Soviet invasion of Czechoslovakia. And I witnessed on this day, which there was a literally a celebration or a monument, or not a monument, but like they were doing like a commemoration of the Soviet invasion. There was literally in Prague, 50 years after the Soviet invasion, a LGBTQ pride parade. And this was in Prague. So this has gone beyond just United States society. This is actually incorporating, trying to get everyone.
Which is unthinkable in Russia.
Yeah, you would think about that. Like, I mean, just think 50 years earlier, they're being invaded by the Soviet Union. And now they're on the day, on like the time that they're commemorating this, they're having an LGBTQ parade. And people are walking, marching in the street, wearing, like, some of them were barely clothed, just like a little, like you know, eye-popping stuff that you would see. But it just goes to show that this is the power of this movement that they have, that they're trying to change for the tomorrow. And I fear that this will ultimately come to, like, you know, lead to the United States demise. But there is an argument to be made that it's not going to necessarily be the case. This is going to just be the demise of Western civilization in all. And I know that sounds hysterical, and, you know, the sky is falling and whatnot. But I mean, just that was probably the most impactful thing that I saw. Is like, I'm in literally Eastern, you know, Central Eastern Europe, and this is happening, you know, and this is the stuff that you normally see in the United States. So what else is, what's the future of this holding on going to?
Well, the interesting thing about that too is that the people marching that parade probably credit themselves and their activism for making that possible in the former East Bloc country, when in fact their liberty that the people there have, because of the superiority of capitalism to make a sustainable society over, you know, the Soviet Union. They lost the arms race. They lost a lot of the components of, you know, it was a Cold War for a long time. They lost some of the hot wars. They, you know, got themselves mired down in Afghanistan, kind of like we did. But we could handle it a little better because we were a different kind of economy and so forth. So even when we make a dumb decision, we can, my opinion's flowing out of me. We can, you know, we can survive better. That delivered freedom, not directly, though people in Czechoslovakia did a whole lot. But what I'm saying is that the fact that that existed, the inspiration for it, the fact that the Soviet Union was preoccupied with fighting us, right, created the conditions where they could have their liberty back again.
Exactly.
And so they could accept a pride parade. And now these very same people are like, we must have Marxism again. Y'all, did you ever look up what happens to people like you in Marxist society? They don't, apparently. And
I'm sorry to cut you off.
No, go ahead.
No, and I would say, and then that's one of the ironies out of all this is the behavior that these groups are allegedly trying to, I don't want to say protest because they're not protesting, but go against, or the type of environment they're trying to create was basically against an intolerant society that didn't accept their LGBTQ beliefs, like so on and so forth. They're literally doing the same thing, except instead of, you know, being against LGBTQ, they're against heterosexual. So it's just like sort of this revolution in which we were rallying against, you know, being intolerant and point of views, but now they're just trying to do the same exact thing, except their views are the ones, you know, that are the predominant that they want, and the intolerant views are the old way of doing things. So it's that's
characteristic of all of these totalitarian movements. Yeah. Is you get to be the oppressor, or, you know, you get to be in total power by playing the victim. You know, people are always shocked to hear me tell the story, but it is true if you go look into it, that Hitler was actually all about social justice and equity. It just, he didn't call it that. He talked very often about the improper distribution of riches, and that the Jews had too much of it, and everybody else was a victim of their financial, gamesmanship, and you know, the way that everybody was a victim. He was a victim. There wasn't equality. He was going to bring equality. There were too many of these people have too much and all that. So a lot of the same rhetoric, where it's not like, you know, that came later. Like, we're dominant, we're amazing. It was more like, how dare they victimize us? We're so oppressed.
Yeah.
And we're oppressed by the rest of Europe and the Versailles Treaty. Wah. Okay. So that got people motivated. This idea of like envy, revenge, the oldest trick in the book. Tap into the things that people are angry about and feel like they want to get revenge about. And you can motivate them to other people. That's what they're doing.
Yep. The same thing with the Bolsheviks and everything. Like, it was like you get people to feel that they're oppressed and they don't have their rights, and that's how you kind of like stir the pot.
And it helps if you have a population that hasn't been properly educated about history and philosophy and all of these things, because they don't have the ability to say, where have I heard this before? Like, wait a minute, this is very familiar. They just don't even know. Now, I did notice, it's kind of off the topic that we came on here to discuss, but I did want to ask you about it since everybody is gathered here and it's similar. You also wrote a piece yesterday about people speaking out about the transgender push into women's sports. So just in general, do you see pushback happening and that might spill over from there? Or what do you think?
I more so than there was at the beginning of the NCAA swimming season, which I don't really understand why it took so long. And it's kind of been frustrating that it just seemed like as soon as Leah Thomas won the first championship in the 500-yard freestyle, I don't know why, that just set everyone off. Like that all of a sudden she was Leah Thomas was dominating female swimmers for 3 months, and there was little stories here and there, some things were, but then as soon as Leah won that event, all of a sudden swimmers started speaking up, coaches started speaking up, politicians started coming.
What made them wait so long?
I'm imagining that they wanted to, and I think this was a bit weak and timid and cowardly. I think they wanted to wait until the end of the swimming season. I don't know, because I know one of the I forget her names. Rekha Gyurgi was a Virginia Tech swimmer. She penned an article 2 days after she lost to Leah Thomas, and because Leah Thomas, how it worked is the NC to advance to the finals, you have to be in the top 16. Rekha, this Virginia Tech swimmer, was 17th and Leah was first. So obviously you could do the math there. If you remove Leah from the equation, Rekha advances to the final championships. And Rekha was a 2016 Hungarian Olympian.
Oh my God.
So why? But then she wrote this thing 2 days after she lost, and I was like, well, why did you wait until after you lost? Unless you purposely wanted to become some kind of martyr. Again, I guess it somewhat served the purpose, but like, why were you not saying these things when this whole story was first brought to light? And I know yesterday, Congresswoman Lauren Boebert, she came out and introduced a House resolution acknowledging that Emma Wyant was the authentic winner of the 500 yards. The Rice University swimming coach, his last name is Huston, I forget his first name. He penned an article for Fox Ed saying this was unfair, and but I'm like, but why are you waiting now? Like, it is March 31st when he wrote this. The swimming season was over for 2 weeks. Like, why, if you were going to attach your name to this, why not do it earlier in the season to make a point? There was another thing that happened. There's the United Kingdom, UK, Britain's version of Leah Thomas with a cycling. There was a transgender cyclist who was competing in a race, and I don't know the whole details of the story. I kind of saw in passing. Someone tagged me in social media today, but it was a guy who was identifying as a girl who was competing in a cycling race, and it was supposed to be a female-only cycling race, and the female participants threatened to boycott the race. And I was like, why weren't we doing that here? Like, and because they threatened to boycott and have the race, they wound up, not allowing the transgender to race in the event. And it's like, I don't know the confines, so I could be speaking ignorantly here, and that could be like a really small organization compared to the monstrous NCAA and Ivy League. So I could be wrong in that. But it just goes to show that, this type of activism, on our side, so to speak, works. And it seems like we're often behind a lot of the times of when we decide to go out and get active. It's like, after all these
I think
things.
everyone's looking at everybody else. Like,
Yeah.
am I allowed? Everybody's so afraid of this cancellation because the internet in a heartbeat can like wreck your life. And I think it's actually, it's so fast at spreading misinformation, disinformation, and like, all kinds of bad things, but it's slowing us down in terms of our making good rational decisions. Because before the internet, let's say before social media, if you had concern about what your peers or what your social circle would say about you having outcry about something, it was like a small subset of people: my neighborhood, my church, my synagogue, my family. Okay, there you go. That's basically it. What do you have, a sum total of a couple hundred people? Now with social media, and pretty much everybody has some kind of social media presence, even if you don't, people who do can take your name and smear it in 5 seconds. So I think people are realizing, like, if I speak out against this, I am literally going up against a much bigger social sanctioning committee that includes the whole world potentially. And that can be a chilling concept for a lot of people. They just don't, they've seen what it's done to people. They've seen people lose their jobs, or, go into work and everybody's like, pack your bags and that we heard you said XYZ, and you're guilty. And first, like, there's no due process of explain yourself, or they'll come to you and say, yeah, we don't disagree with what you said, but you need to apologize. And now your integrity and your dignity is on the line. So I think people are really stifled and they don't want to say anything. And I'm not saying I agree with that. I just think I kind of understand it intellectually, that might be what's going on. And also the way the media has been about this, so slanted pro the LGBTQ agenda, all the way down, like you said, to kindergarten. They're just very pro. There's no question. There's no negatives anywhere. Look, anywhere in the mainstream media, you don't see anyone going, is this a good idea? It's all like, isn't this wonderful? So you have to wait. You have to wait till like February, and for like something like Daily Wire to publicize, and not everybody's going to read that Will Thomas, right? Leah Thomas, aka Will Thomas, went from 462 second place. He was competed as a male for 3 years. Most people don't even know that. Yeah. They just think this person has been swimming as a woman his whole college career. No. And in fact, swam as a man for 3 years. COVID comes in, interrupts everybody's swim time, comes back after COVID as a female, as a woman swimmer, and suddenly goes to number one. And as somebody pointed out in the comments, you win by 38 seconds. And, I'm going to keep saying all he's done is take enough of the hormone therapy to get his testosterone down to where it's below the legal amount that a woman is allowed to have, like that I would be allowed to have, and swim as a female on the team. All you got to do is get below that limit and you swim as a woman. That's the rules. But I'm sorry, if this had been surfaced sooner, and if people could, maybe introduce a little skepticism and cynicism into this entire conversation, maybe it would have happened sooner also. But the media has absolutely advocated for one point of view on this too, don't you think?
Well, that's interesting enough. But you probably don't notice, I was actually in class with William Thomas. He sat right next to me in one of my classes in fall 2018. Had no idea any of this was coming, or he had any of those, type of things. But I'm 6 feet tall. He's 6'3" or 4 or something like that. He was.
They keep lying about that too.
Yeah, I mean, he's like a very tall male, and also interestingly, a part of this whole thing is he did swim for 3 years as a guy, but the female swimming team was told a year before he actually joined the team that he was going to be joined, and the Ivy League, NCAA, and University of Pennsylvania all allowed this to happen. They kept it under wraps. So had this gotten out there earlier, maybe it could have been
That's true. Mm-hmm.
But there was definitely like a concerted effort to keep it secretive, and then kind of like it exploded on the scene. So
I think they wanted to make it seem like he'd been a woman, like a trans woman longer.
Well, I think he swam.
than he
But
actually
last
was.
year, last year he was on the men's team. He was swimming as a transitioning male, if I've had that correctly. So he was on the men's team, but was wearing the female swimsuits and participating in that as a transitioning male. Like kind of like there's a transgender swimmer at Yale currently, Isaac Herzig, I think his name is, who's going from woman to male transgender, but he kept, or she, keeping up these pronouns is tough.
That's why I just say he. I'm going with
She
biological.
she didn't like do what was necessarily to become an official male and swim there. And I would also argue that it would probably make her job more difficult competing against males all the time than just females that she was biologically. So yeah, it's just definitely one of those things where, you know, that you kind of need to fight back. I guess there are going to be people who speak up who would kind of suffer, but if this doesn't ever get done, or if there isn't no pushback or fight back, then this is going to continue or have society change altogether where it's normalized. So we kind of have to, like, yeah, I mean, there are going to be people. I had someone say that to me, like, you can't expect them to, what about cancellation culture? And my name is all over attached to this whole William, Thomas thing. I've been covering it from day one. I broke several stories on the whole thing. So if I don't really ever think for the rest of my life I'm going to be writing for the Washington Examiner. So at some point it's like, do I now have to worry about what's going to happen in, my future employers and whatnot? And I know, and I took that chance anyway because I just felt it was the right thing to do and it had to be like spoken out against. And more people need to have courage and do the right thing and speak up against these things and resist against them the way the left resist against a lot of the conservative values that we've had.
Yeah. And I mean, I just want us to be able to get accurate information again.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, one of the things that I really appreciate about the work that you've been doing, even though it falls under the heading of, opinion writing, I mean, right? They call it commentary.
Correct.
Because and now maybe you can enlighten us as to why they're calling it commentary as opposed to reporting. Because I read that article that you wrote, and while you did inject like a couple of comments in there, it's still at least as much, if not more, reportage than what I see in some of the New York Times articles, CNN, etc., which seems start to finish like op-eds every single time. And yet they're calling that news. And they are, even at the Washington Examiner, calling yours commentary. You surfaced documents that nobody else was reporting on. I'm just fascinated why that is.
That's probably my encroaching on other areas that I'm probably not supposed to be doing. I'm a commentary fellow, so my job is basically to do commentary. But like for things like this, I just kind of figured I feel they're important. So it's probably more to do with me than the Washington Examiner kind of silenced me. That's just my job. So I can't go from like commentary fellow to reporter.
Got it.
I'm probably just encroaching on other people's jobs more so than that. But I haven't had anyone told me not to do it. So I'm going to, I guess, continue to do it as often as I can until I'm.
Well, it's refreshing. Commentary full of facts. I mean, realistically, all commentary should start with facts because like, what are you commenting on? Otherwise it's just pure. But I've seen so many pieces lately where it's commentary with zero facts, or it's something purporting to be facts that's all commentary, And so I was just curious about that. Is there anything we missed today from the stuff that we discussed, or any other rocks that we didn't turn over, or things we should have the audience think about, or parents who are maybe watching this, or somebody on the replay who didn't get to ask us any questions? Anything else we can anticipate that we should mention? What should parents do? I mean, is there anything to be done other than don't join the Connections Club?
Yeah, I have to actually defer to the people here who are actually parents. I can't. I could say everything I want, but I'd be a huge.
Well, my answer is always leave. So my answer is like, don't have your kids in. And Kelly homeschools too.
Yeah.
So I mean, I don't know what else to say. Do you think, maybe you have an inkling of this, are there any legal avenues for parents in terms of, well, we know in Florida, this can't happen now, right? We hope. But in other states, I mean, is this an argument for them doing legislation like what Florida did, do you think?
I would think that legislation's kind of a Band-Aid on the whole issue and a temporary fix, because that kind of swings, with however the political winds blow. I mean,
Right.
if they're saying this were to lose his next election, and a Democrat comes in, well, the Democrat's going to undo everything that DeSantis did. So you're basically talking about maybe something that could technically be in existence for only 2 years, and given the bureaucracy of our country and governments in general, it could be legitimately argued that everything DeSantis put in that bill won't even go into effect in 2 years, because of the time it takes to come. So
that's so true.
I would argue that the bigger remedy to all this is to change the actual culture, and start to get out. Like, people have been talking about CRT, and Glenn Youngkin got a lot of publicity for putting those laws, but Florida elects a new governor every 4 years. So this could legitimately be something that only lasts for 3 years. And the remedy is to have people learn and be educated that CRT is bad. And same thing with this, like, be educated that this is going on and that this is bad, and change that first. And then it'll be like a domino effect. Once you change that, that culture, the belief system, those values, then the domino will fall to, like, people will believe that this is the right thing, that this should be the law. It's like anything. The left's like, they started, you go back 20, 30, 40 years ago, people would think gay marriage is wrong. Now, majority of people support it. And that's because they work to chop away at the culture. It's super hard because you have, companies like Disney who own, Disney, Marvel, ABC, ESPN, other different companies that basically every American is watching, and just in leisure time, not even trying to be indoctrinated or educated or anything, just kind of like watching TV, and they constantly see this left-wing messaging. So it is going to be super hard to change that culture, but I think ultimately that's what needs to be done, because any legislative tactics, or moves are just a temporary solution until the next party. And given how fickle we are, the voting population is the country, where you just swing from like every 4 years, it seems, it's only a temporary solution.
Well, and I think it sounds glib to say leave or disengage, but it's how reform has happened in the past for things like the church.
Mm-hmm.
For example, different churches, when people said, like, we're out, or back in the early days of this country, you had a sort of dialectic in the sense that, you have different towns spring up in New England around churches. And each church had its own way of doing its thing. And then the town was around the church, and the church could kick you out of the town too, right? I mean, it's like, if you don't do things our way, get out, right? And if you don't like it, you can leave. I mean, you weren't a prisoner either way. It's just they wanted things done their way. And so what people would do is, if they didn't want to follow the rules of that, they left, and they would go start their own town or start their own church, whatever. And the ones that were competitive were the ones that were able to attract and keep the most parishioners, or the most people. And some of them died on the vine because they were too restrictive and too controlling and too whatever. And so I think if you look through history, when you are free to do it, which we still are, and hopefully we will remain so, then, and I actually think one way to retain that freedom is to use it. Okay. It's harder to get people back into a box than, than to keep them there if they're already there. So that's why I tell people to start your own thing, find a group of parents that feel as you do, start a co-op, a micro school, homeschool, leave, disengage, don't watch Disney, don't give your kids a cell phone with social media when they're, 5, these kinds of things, because you do have that freedom. You do still, it's all very scary because we think of the people who imagine that they're trapped, that they have no choice. They have to send their kids. And of course, we are indignant because it's taxpayer dollars paying for this, and it will ruin millions of people. But when you talk about changing the culture, my perception of that is that's how you change the culture. You do things differently. You just don't allow them to define what the culture is. They can go ahead and define the culture for them. But as of this moment, they still don't have the literal ability to define it for you or your children. They might someday, but the more quiet people stay, the more likely that is to happen.
Well, and people are so accustomed to not talking with people who have opposing opinions about these topics. And I think it is important to have those conversations with people, because there's a lot that people who are, buying into this are unaware of. I've found that there's been situations, whether it's politicians or people in the community, they support something without all of the research behind it. So they're forced comprehensive sex ed. They have no idea what is in the curriculum. They have no idea what organizations back it. So being able to just tell somebody, hey, are you aware of this? Here's the information, to be informing. And then I think it's also important to emphasize to people that it's true. We're impressionable people. I mean, all people are. That's why there's propaganda media in different countries, utilize it in different scales. So a club like we were talking about, that is so focused on certain things and how that is executed and how that's hidden from parents, it becomes that focus, and what input often equates to output. That's why, like in the community I live in, a lot of people hate, conservative media. And, we hear that. Well, why do they hate it? Because they know that people are being, they believe people are being influenced by it. And the same goes the other way. People will, certain media networks like New York Times or CNN, there's reasons why people don't like those media outlets. And yet, there's people out there that don't like those things because they know that messages and music and all these things influence people. But at the same time, they're for these clubs and they're saying, well, we're not trying to influence kids. Well, what's going on? You're getting kids every week or, multiple times a week to engage in this focus. This is now their focus. And then their focus goes out of the club to do all these other little things. And then there's all these videos we've introduced them to that they can watch on their own. And then we're weaving it into art and science and math and ELA and all these things. Well, it's all about that focus. Where's the focus at? And what input will equate to output?
What a wonderful way of explaining it. You're so right. And it's so ironic to me listening because I'm thinking, when they are concerned about the conservative inputs and people will be influenced, and I'm thinking, well, we don't talk about dominant culture, right? Well, the dominant culture of education is left-leaning progressive, has been since forever, since it was progressives who founded public education. So I just find it ironic that they're concerned about the adults, most of whom were educated in their system that they run and they've designed, and they've dominated for at least the generation that's alive watching Fox News. Okay. And if they had properly educated them in the first place to have, be critical thinkers and use discernment or whatever, they wouldn't have any concerns, would they, about them being overly influenced by bad ideas? So I find it hilarious. It's kind of like, didn't y'all educate them? Like, why are you worried? What happened? It's just, I don't know. I like laughing at them, whenever I can, because otherwise I'll go a little bit crazy. How that is. So any final thoughts, anything that we should leave people with? What do you think, Christopher? What's your final thing on this?
I guess just, again, I feel somewhat reluctant to give parental advice, being that I'm not a parent, but if I were a parent, I would try to be as engaged as with my children as much as possible as to what they're learning in school. I know that's probably way easier to state, given that, parents are working and have all kinds of responsibilities. And that's why I feel reluctant even saying that. But I guess just doing something where, talk to your kids, like, what did you learn today? I think that would probably be huge. Like, the stereotypical, family dinner at the dinner table when you have a conversation, maybe something like that. Something where you could basically see what's going on. And, I know some states have tried to pass laws, which you could post school curriculums online, maybe check those out if that's available in your area. But just kind of, I guess, be as active in your, children's school life while they're in school as you possibly can. And get engaged as much as you possibly can. Again, and I know I say this, I'm not a parent, so I feel like even it's probably way
but you know what, Christopher, though? Okay. See, I don't subscribe to the whole stay in your lane garbage. First
You're
of all,
not
you're
saying you're late. I just feel like
no,
I can't really, make an
no,
informed
I mean,
comment.
but you're speaking, you're knowledgeable about what's going on in schools and this issue. And so I think even though you don't have children, you have a stake in this. You do. You don't have the same stake that a parent has who has a kid in school, but it would be like saying, because I don't have kids in the school, I have kids, but I have kids in the school, that I don't have a stake in what goes on in the school. We all have a stake. We're all taxpayers. These kids are going to grow up to like be running our nursing home or the medical quota that decides if we get cancer treatment, whatever it is, possibly being our equity trained doctors. We need, we have a stake in how people are educated. That is even the argument for public schooling in the first place, right? That we all have a stake in everyone being educated. Well, there's some truth to that. And so I as a parent, I welcome your thoughts. Now, obviously, if you wanted to tell me specifically how to talk to my kid, that might be different. But you're saying get involved in your kid's education. That's pretty good advice. I don't care who it's coming from. And I agree with you 100%. What about you, Kelly? What do you think are final thoughts here on this particular topic?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it is absolutely necessary to know what's going on in your school district, your county office of education, and then your state department of education. And ways that you can do that is by meeting with the curriculum director in your school district. Ways that you can do that in the county office of education, look on their website, look on your school's website, look up the board agenda, and often board meeting agendas, you can search key terminology. So look for things. Not everything will be on there because there are things that are starting to be hidden from parents. Look on your state department of education's website. I mean, here in California, we can view the recommended literature list. We can look at a customized search of the recommended literature. Then we can look up different frameworks. So right now, the math framework is viewable for anybody. And then we can be aware of, different legislation and things like that. We can ask our kids, what kinds of books are you reading in library? What videos are being shown? You can ask your curriculum director this, even if you don't have kids in the school. You can ask to see what supplemental curriculum is being used. So all of these things, it's really important to kind of build back those layers. And then if there's ever a question, a legal question about your parental rights in your state, there are attorneys that work pro bono that could answer questions. Oftentimes, I had questions starting in 2016 when I first learned about social emotional learning. So I had emailed attorneys asking about that when I did all this research on that topic. But there's all kinds of legislative bills as well. So be familiar also, one more layer, with the websites of your state. If there's a teachers union or, any kind of union presence of either the National Education Association, the American Federation of Teachers, AFT, NEA, and then your state teachers union, who are the union reps at your schools? So there's a lot to this, but it would be great if there's parents that kind of form teams and they can kind of divvy up some of the information and research out there.
Right.
But, yeah.
And I mean, a lot of times when we've given this advice, as far as like, go look for this and look for that, the next question I get from people is, okay, and what exactly am I looking for? And then they want to know, and if I find it, what do I do? And that's where I have a really hard time, because I know they're going to find stuff. There's not a district anymore that doesn't have an equity plan. First of all, there's not a district anymore that isn't being openly, very, very big on the pride parades and all the, all this stuff. So the chances of you finding it are 99.9%, if not 100. So then, but it's about being informed so that if you want to take the next step, whatever that might be, nobody can tell you it doesn't exist or we don't do that or whatever, right? Am I getting that correct? That you're informing yourself not to see if it is there, but just so that they can't hide it. They can't pretend it's not there or get wind of people looking for it and then tuck it away someplace. So once you've got that, then I think what I would say is sort of the parent advocate side of things is now you have a decision to make. Now that you've seen it with your own eyes, you have to decide how comfortable you are navigating this with during your child's tenure in that school. You won't be able, I don't think I'm being too pessimistic when I say you will not get rid of it during your child's time in that school. You probably won't be able to get rid of it if they're with the amount of money behind this and everything else and your children's time in that school. So it's going to be there. The question is, are you okay with taking your chances on your kids being there with it?
Mm-hmm. That's exactly.
And that's going to vary from family to family and how well you know your kid and what else is going on in your life, and just recognize things can change on a dime.
Mm-hmm.
You can think like, my kid, I look at my own children, K-5, like we were thick as thieves. And I would, thought, my kids would never fall for things. I mean, they were homeschooled in the first years. When we went into public school, they carried that independent spirit with them. And I was like, oh, this is going to be fine. I'm not worried. I mean, I was worried about the academics, but I wasn't worried about the social pressures. I felt like good values, they know what they're doing. And it wasn't even 2 years into middle school that I was like, what happened to my kids? Where'd you go? And so it's tremendous, the amount of the peer pressure, the faculty pressure, et cetera. So just stay on top of it. It's like a decision you're going to have to make probably each semester, I would say,
right.
To be fair.
Right. And parents often ask me, what can I opt out of? That's something best to ask an attorney. I know with regards to the implementation of SEL, social emotional learning, when our kids were in school, the particular program that the principal had installed, the daily mindfulness moment, mindfulness meditation to the Buddhist singing bowl. When that happened, we opted our kids out of that and some of the other implementation of this program. But we needed the help of the attorneys. But there's things now that are, written into law that parents cannot opt their kids out of. So as far as what you can do, but your kids will still be exposed to this. So it continues to be this conversation of, that's why I'm with you. At the end of 2019, I had reached my maximum. It took me, from the fall of 2016 to the end of the spring 2019, and all these different experiences with the school, trying, trial and error. I had seen all the evidence, had all the experiences from, point A to point B, and our kids were already asking to be homeschooled. And so I said, you know what, we're done. We're done with this public school system. And, it was a big leap. Parents are afraid of homeschooling because there's a lot of false ideas out there about it. But it has been the greatest gift, I would say, for me as well as the kids. And so I think parents should navigate if they can start a learning pod or other opportunities out there for homeschooling or, just alternatives. It's worth looking into because you're investing in your child.
Would you say it's fair to say that the time you invested in trying to navigate the school and just opt out, do this, do that, keep abreast of what's going on, et cetera, would you say that that was as much work, if not more work, than homeschooling your own kids?
Homeschooling has been tremendously better than everything there. Actually, it was really funny because several months into homeschooling, I went for a checkup with my doctor, and she's like, everything is like, I was already healthy and doing well, but everything, even, blood pressure was really, really good. And the doctor asked me, what are you doing? I said, I'm homeschooling because it was true. It was so rewarding, not just for the kids, but also for me, because there was things I wasn't taught in public school, growing up, that I was watching them get to learn and experience. And you see the light bulb go off and you see them not despise learning, but then you see them enjoy it and choose to do it in their free time. I saw our kids develop in reading, and they were reading in their free time. And I just remember looking at my husband like, look at the kids. It wasn't class time. It was outside of class time. I hadn't asked them to do anything. They had picked books that they loved their curriculum and what they were doing.
That's so awesome.
So-
Yeah, I've tried to tell people that too. It's like it's a full-time job to stay on top of the mess. Like look what Christopher found and all of that. And I don't want you to have to reveal sources or anything, but I mean that's not easy for a parent to just go find, right? What you found, Christopher, with the
I'm not a parent, so I can't comment, but I would absolutely say I had help, significant help from people who were parents and who had went above and beyond their normal efforts in life to go out and find that. So I would say that it can be done. It's obviously hard work, and the parent that did provide it, it should be like hailed as a hero because that was they were responsible.
Anonymous hero somewhere.
Yes.
So yes, whoever you are, heroic parent, thank you so much for sharing this documentation with Christopher so he could share it with the rest of the world. And I'm very grateful to both of you for coming on and discussing it with us. Parents who are watching, anyone who's watching, taxpayers watching, go look up Kinsey. Go look up at the Kinsey scale. Go look up some of his experiments, like Kelly said. And I'm not saying that to be glib. Sometimes I think you really need to see things to understand why we're having such a reaction. But I do think it was heroic. They brought it to you. It took work for them to find it. It took work for you to write the article and put it all together. And as you've already seen, you put yourself at risk a little bit because you took some flack over it. So
that means it's working. So
exactly, you're over the target. But at the same time, that consider that in your thinking when you're like, all right, I'm going to go get involved in my kid's school. Like, this is what it looks like. And then what do you do? Right. Yeah. So thank you everybody for spending your Friday afternoon with us and taking this opportunity to learn and listen to these great folks who've worked so hard to bring us the truth about what's happening, at least in California, but probably other places, in the recruiting of our children into this agenda. So thanks everybody. Have a great afternoon, and the replay will be up immediately afterwards. Bye.
Thank you.